Before we get further into the video, have you picked up any of my merch? We've got this MySpace deathcore design, complete with edgy slogan and impact font on the back. We've got the generic hardcore shirt, including the Mosh Girl, the Neon Cartoon Monster shirt, a personal favorite of mine by my friend Michael Shantz. There's the Pop Punk with Breakdowns shirt. So if you want some new merch, check it out at the link in the description of this video. So here is a question that comes up, I don't know, fairly often. People have asked me some variation of this question a few times. This is from the community tab on my main channel from Toadolina Kong. I don't know what that means, but they ask, do you feel the current pop punk revival is too nostalgia based, just trying to sound like the early 2000s, or is it progressing the sound in a modern and fresh way? Another version of this that I've gotten a few times, which again I think is fair, is, you know, I've been kind of hard on metal many times for being stuck in the past, you know, for talking about those festival lineups where it's like headlined by Rob Zombie, the Scorpions, and Guns N' Roses, and it's some big festival in Spain or whatever. And I'm like, you know, I've said many times how frustrating it is to see lineups like that and to see how much people in the rock and metal world kind of cling to the 90s and early 2000s. And I've criticized a lot of metalcore bands for sounding like, you know, some combination of Linkin Park and Breaking Benjamin and stuff like that. But I have not been so critical of pop punk, right? Even though obviously a lot of that stuff is referencing the same period. So I think it's a fair question to ask, and I wanted to give it a good answer. So the short answer to that question is yes. I do feel like the current pop punk revival is too nostalgia based and trying too much to sound like the early 2000s. I do. That's not true of all of it, and I feel like it was less true even just a couple years ago. But basically, since MGK came out with Tickets to My Downfall, I think the genre, the sort of pop punk revival, kind of became a little bit less innovative. And for anyone who's not familiar, I'll play you what I'm talking about here just so you can hear what I'm talking about. Like there's the in my head part, which is, you know, pretty much verbatim from the Blank song. So that would be one example of something that, to me, like this whole album and Mainstream Sellout, you know, both of these are like very clearly referencing early 2000s Blink, right? I mean, he even had Travis Barker on it. But it's not just MGK. You know, it's easy to pick on him and say that, you know, he's the culprit. And I think maybe to some extent he inspired other people to do more of it because they're like, oh, MGK went to #1, you know, basically just redoing Blink songs from 2003. Maybe I should do the same. But it's not just him. I mean, this would be an example to me. I think this band is good. So, you know, I don't mean to be overly harsh. I think this song is well done. But like, this song is called I Miss 2003. This is by a band called As It Is.
I've been feeling old and out of context. And if I'm really being honest,
I mean, this song is literally about like, man, take me back to 2003. Life was better back then. It's a very Jeremy McKinnon kind of vocal melody. You know, till 4 in the morning, singing Newfound Glory at the top of our lungs. And it's not bad. I mean, I think this is a good song, and I think this band is good. So there's sort of one question, which I'll answer in a little bit more detail, but the sort of main question that comes up to me when we talk about this is like, is it important to be original? And I would say no. It doesn't have to be original to be good. I don't think originality has any inherent value. But the question was, is modern pop punk, the pop punk revival, too nostalgic, too reminiscent of the early 2000s? I would say it is. That's not true of everything, especially the stuff that was coming out a few years ago. Lil Aaron and Lil Tracy, some of those people, that felt like it was something really new that was sort of mixing like pop punk samples and vocal melodies with trap beats and sort of a different aesthetic. That felt like it was something new, but it seems like that style kind of fell off. There is some stuff still happening that's kind of cool. You know, this song is a couple years old, I guess, by now, but Wicca Phase Springs Eternal would be an example of somebody who's doing stuff like, I wouldn't call this exactly pop punk, but it's pop punk adjacent. This is clearly reminiscent of that era of pop punk, but it doesn't feel like it's just a cover, right? Originality essentially doesn't exist anymore. Everything is derivative of everything, whether it is super contemporary or not. The issue is artists leaning way too hard on nostalgia, remixing hits from 10 or 15 years ago. I agree with that, yeah. I think it's very difficult to do something original while still making music that's accessible enough that anyone wants to listen to. Like, I could write a song that's like nothing you've ever heard before, but that doesn't mean you would like it, right? So I think that's part of the challenge. I think Wicked Phase is doing something cool, but again, not exactly the biggest artist in the world, but I think he's really cool. Another band, or I guess maybe it's just one person that I think is doing something pretty interesting, is Underscores, which is kind of pop punk with sort of hyper pop elements.
All I wanted was a mention. Yeah, I guess I must have pissed you off.
I don't know if this is a person or a band or whatever, but it's pretty interesting. Like, this doesn't feel like 2003 to me. Like, it's probably drawing from the early 2000s. Like, if you played this for someone in 2001, they wouldn't really know what to think of it, right? So I think this is definitely doing something different. The glitchy stuff here is cool. So, like, I don't know. At least this song is, I guess, like glitchcore pop punk. This is pretty interesting to me. This feels like a fresh sound. Another artist who I like quite a bit is Dwayne.
Labels wouldn't call me back. I'm about to make a milli stack. I feel like ammo after Mac.
This song is very interesting. So this is a really interesting transition. Jairus Johnson would refer to it as TikTok core. You know, these artists, Kim Dracula does this, where it's like several genres in one song. Yeah, it's a cool video too. This feels new and fresh to me. Again, obviously drawing on, you know, stuff from the 90s and 2000s, but you can see, look, 13,000 views in over a year. Clearly this is not hitting, unfortunately. And I kind of feel the same way about Lil Lotus's older stuff. Well, this isn't older, but, you know, it's, I don't know, almost 3 years old now. This song that he put out when he signed to Epitaph, I thought was really cool. So what I think is interesting about this song is that he's obviously referencing a lot of these like melodies and that riff. I don't know if that's a sample or what it's from, but that sounds like it could be an emo drive-through records pop punk kind of band from 2002, but with trap percussion. And also I think the lyrics are a big part of what felt innovative to me about this wave of stuff. Like, pop punk bands before, of course, would talk about being sad and how the girl at school doesn't like me and rah rah rah, all that kind of stuff. One thing I liked a lot about these bands is that they were talking about stuff that was a lot heavier, like pretty serious dark shit about, you know, addiction and mental health and stuff like that. And you could maybe argue that they went too hard on that stuff and that it was a bad influence. You could say all that stuff, and that might be true, but still, at least it felt to me a lot more, I guess I'll say more substantial than a lot of the early 2000s pop punk, which, I mean, I love that stuff, but, you know, nobody's going to hold up, you know, Alistair or Phoenix TX as examples of like, well, actually, there is a Phoenix TX song that has good lyrics, but you get what I mean. Nobody's going to hold that up as examples of like, you know, really deep lyrics or anything like that. Whereas I would say that, you know, when it comes to people like Lotus and that whole wave of the, you know, goth boy clique type people doing this kind of stuff, I think lyrically it was new and different and felt a lot more, yeah, authentic and substantial. And so I think that was interesting. But what's unfortunate is that people really didn't seem to like that. They didn't seem to want it. You know, if you looked at any of the comments from when this came out, like, you know, any of the comments on Epitaph's fucking Facebook page or even on this video, probably, you know, so many like angry fucking boomer takes saying that they ruined music and this is terrible and rah, rah, rah. You know, it just seemed clear this is not what people want. You know, what the rock fans like, you know, they like his newer stuff. Like, finally, people have started to accept Lil Lotus now that he sounds a lot more kind of, I guess I would say more straightforward and less innovative. You know, I love Lotus, so I don't mean that as like, you know, I don't mean to put this stuff down or anything like that, but, you know, this is what he sounds like now. I don't want to say by the numbers, but very familiar early 2000s pop punk, right? You know, they're playing in a pool and everything. This is still very good. I totally agree with that. But the question is not whether this stuff is good or not, because I do think it's good. The question that was asked was, do I think that it's too nostalgic, trying to sound like the early 2000s? And I kind of think it is, as much as I like this. I mean, Lil Lotus's new stuff is awesome. But, you know, the boomer fans, or even the 30-year-olds who might as well be boomers, clearly this is what they want. They want stuff that sounds like the early 2000s. They don't want stuff that sounds new. Another artist that they bring up all the time to me as the one that they like is Kennyhoopla. And I think Kennyhoopla is good, but is this innovative? I would say no. This is very by the numbers, early 2000s pop punk. Doesn't mean it's bad. I think this is very well done. Rock fans like it because it's safe and familiar. This sounds like something that you would have heard, you know, on Much Music in 2002, right? Or as another example, a band that everyone is blowing me up about right now, this band No Pressure, which is Parker Cannon from The Story So Far, is pop punk band. Again, I think this is good. This just came out, but you know, is there anything innovative about this? No, not at all. You know, sounds like a band that I would have heard with Newfound Glory in 2002. I mean, even the cover art looks like it's from 2002, right? Yeah, the album is good. This is just what rock fans want. They don't want new, they want familiar. I think that's what it is. This is just like all those throwback 60s and 70s bands like Greta Van Fleet, but only for 30-year-olds. That's 100% exactly what it is. People are going to be mad at me for saying this because all that crap with auto-tune and trap drums is trash and blah, blah, blah. Like, I've heard it all a million times. So do I think this is good? I do, but it's not innovative. That raises another question, which I sort of mentioned before, like, is originality inherently valuable? I don't know that it is. I mean, I appreciate it, but what's more important is that it's good. And I will say that I think some of the new stuff that references the early 2000s does it better than people in the early 2000s did. For example, like, I think Sueco, who someone asked me about earlier, I think this is one of the best songs anyone has ever done in this style. Yes, the most important aspect of music is emotional connection. That's right. It doesn't have to be original to have that emotional connection. This is a great fucking song. Vocal performance in this is incredible. Like, this song will still sound good in 20 years. No question. Is it original? No. It doesn't need to be original, right? With any musician, you kind of got to balance a few things. It's sort of like, what do you want to do creatively and what is going to enable you to pay the bills? And the fact of the matter is, in rock, being original is not going to pay the bills. Nobody wants that. In fact, it's going to hurt your career. So what I would do if I was in their shoes, I'd be like, okay, you guys want me to play TRL pop punk that sounds like Drive-Thru Record songs from 2003? You got it. You guys hated it when I did something new. You guys hated it when I mixed in other elements and, you know, when I tried to do something different. You guys hated it. You guys like it when I do predictable stuff that sounds like it's from 2003. Here you go. You can have it. Another example of someone who, well, at least this song, I would say, is pretty familiar. Definitely sounds like it could have been from 2002. I also think you have to look at music trends under various lenses. Like, most Zoomers are either listening to some sort of drill or hyperpop. Most of them do not really like guitar music from what I've noticed. Yeah, exactly. You got to think, who is my audience? It's not 16-year-olds. If you're playing guitar music, it's 30-year-olds. And 30-year-olds do not like new music. They don't like something that sounds new. People like music that sounds like what they were into when they were in high school. Another artist that sounds like that but does it very well is Nothing Nowhere. I think this song is fucking awesome. This is one of my favorite songs of the last several years. I've talked about it many times. And I will continue to talk about it because it's fucking great. And I love Joe. I love what he has to say. I think his music is awesome. What's interesting to me is that his older stuff, like, he's been doing emo rap longer than not everybody, but most people. He's been doing it for a long time. Very ahead of the curve. But it feels like he didn't really start kind of getting over with rock audiences until he did stuff like this that is a lot less innovative than what he was doing 5 years ago. The video is amazing. I love it. Finally, this is, you know, he's getting over with rock audiences in a way that, you know, he didn't before, because this is what people want. They want something that's old and familiar. At least when it comes to guitar music, they don't want something that is new and different. So to answer the question, do I feel that the current pop punk revival is too nostalgia based, trying to sound like the early 2000s? Well, I guess it depends what hat I'm wearing. I like stuff that sounds new and fresh and different. Like, I heard this stuff 20 years ago. I don't really need to hear it again. So for me personally, as a fan, I would say I am kind of disappointed that what felt fresh and new and different to me in 2019, you know, kind of doesn't feel fresh and new and different to me anymore. To me, it feels like kind of a rehash of 2002. So for me as a fan, I'm a little disappointed by that. But, you know, if I'm sort of putting on the hat of a label or an A&R, or, you know, more of like an industry type person from like a marketing perspective, I get it. If you try to do something different, you're fighting a fucking uphill battle, especially in rock. People like nu metal and they like Blink. That's pretty much it. Those are your options, at least as far as like alternative music goes. So you can sound like nu metal, or you can sound like Blink or Linkin Park, whatever. Like, you know, that's sort of what you need to do. If you want to be marketable, nu metal and 2000s pop punk are kind of your options, which is disappointing to me. I felt like for a minute, there was like a wave of new stuff happening that was actually popular with young people. But, you know, that kind of fell apart, I think. So I'm a little bit salty that, you know, the Goth Boy Click stuff of, you know, 2015 to 2019 didn't really take off. That was sort of pop punk influenced. Yeah, or you do $15 deathcore tours till you die. Exactly. So I'm a little bit disappointed by it personally, but I get it. And, you know, you got to do what you got to do to pay the bills. And I'm not saying, by the way, that people are only doing this for the money. I don't think that's true. I think this is what they wanted to do. So I don't think that they're like selling out or making compromises, but it just is a little bit disappointing to me. That's all. So don't do porno grind. Hey, if you want to do porno grind, do porno grind. It's true. It could be worse. We could be dusting off post-punk again. That's right. We could have the post-punk revival. Now that would be grim. Nobody wants that to happen. I kind of predicted that the emo rap sound would eventually go full 2000s pop punk. I thought so too. I'm not surprised, but you know, it is what it is. But anyway, for those who have asked, that is my opinion on the 2000s pop punk revival. I mean, I don't dislike it, but I do kind of wish that it was a little bit more innovative than it is, because it feels to me like it just sort of ended up being the same thing as metalcore and gent and all these other kind of really repetitive, backward looking genres.